What's up, Earth Rockers? It's your boy Shovatar, back again. Back again to talk about Castlevania 64. Kind of. It's not exactly Castlevania 64, it's slightly different. Castlevania 64 Legacy of Darkness, or rather just Castlevania Legacy of Darkness, to simplify things. And we've got a cool little opening cutscene here. I guess let's take a little bit of an opportunity to talk about what this game is and why this game exists. So, if you watch my videos about Castlevania 64, I explained that Castlevania 64 was a very strange game in many ways. The first 3D Castlevania, the first Castlevania to come out since Symphony of the Night, so pretty big shoes to fill, pretty high expectations. And the game was rushed. They, Konami, Computer Entertainment Kobe, KKEC, did not really get to implement all the things they wanted to implement. They didn't really get to finish the game. And the result was a rushed game that was released in early 1999. And then they basically just kind of kept working on it and released this game in late 1999. So both this and Castlevania 64 came out in the same year. And you could think of this game as basically like the finished version of Castlevania 64. Like, if they had gotten all the time in the world that they wanted to finish Castlevania 64 and release it, this is what you would have. And that might make it sound like it's a direct upgrade from Castlevania 64, and in some ways it is. Like, this fucking intro cutscene right here with the Bloody Tears remix playing is like the fucking coolest thing I've ever seen. I love this intro, by the way. It's so like atmospheric and cinematic, and is setting exactly the tone that the game is going for. And this was always like one of the N64 games, one of Castlevania 64's like strongest components was the atmosphere and the tone. And excuse me, this little intro is exactly what I'm talking about. Excuse me again. So what is what are the central differences between Legacy of Darkness and Castlevania 64? Well, the centerpiece of Legacy of Darkness is the Cornell story, or Cornell route, or Cornell campaign, whatever you want to call it, which I think, no, not yet. There's going to be a voiceover narration in a moment, but I have a few more minutes to talk. So, there are 4 routes, 4 playable characters in Legacy of Darkness. You have Carrie and Reinhardt reprising their appearance from Castlevania 64, and theirs is sort of like, it's just Castlevania 64 again with some redesigned levels. And then the Cornell story, which is like the centerpiece of the game, is a prequel to the events of Castlevania 64 and features a couple of completely new levels unique only to Cornell. And look at him go! Cornell was actually planned as a playable character in Castlevania 64, but he, along with another playable character named, I think, Collar, both ended up getting cut. What made them decide to stick with Reinhardt and Carrie? I guess just to keep the whip-wielding Castlevania classic protagonist, and then kind of like the Maria analog in the form of Carrie. I'm guessing that was the thought process. Cornell is kind of like a strange, new type of protagonist, but they brought him back here, and I think I'm gonna have to shut up. Where is he? Come on, talk. Talk. Fucking talk.
Cornell,
there he is.
also known as Blue Crescent Moon. Through magic of the ancients, this man-beast warrior obtained a physical body of near immortality and a power that surpasses that of a wild beast. The man-beasts, choosing to live harmoniously with humans, sealed away their enormous magical powers to prevent them from being used. However, through severe ascetic training, Cornell acquired the art for releasing the sealed man-wolf power. After a year of traveling and ascetic training, Cornell rushed back to his village, only to find that evil spirits had set the village on fire, engulfing the village in a lotus flower of flames. His only living blood relative, his sister Ada, was carried away by the evil spirits. Now, he must save her. Cornell uses the man-wolf's acute sense of smell to track the scent of his sister's blood. Reinhard Schneider, Carrie Fernandez. We go back 8 years in time, before the period in which these two young warriors risked their lives battling against the devil. Now, the truth that has been shrouded in the gloom of darkness will be revealed.
So as I'm watching this footage back, I'm noticing something that I didn't really notice at the time of recording. And when I point it out, it might drive you insane, but I just feel like this must be acknowledged one way or the other. When I first started playing Legacy of Darkness, I was given the opportunity to turn on this like expansion pack feature, which I guess is supposed to make it like higher res, like higher quality. So I just did it because it did seem to kind of be making a difference. But I believe even prior to turning on the high resolution expansion pack thing, I was getting this odd like graphical glitch. I think it's called overscan lines. It basically looks like a little white line along the left side of the screen, and so I turned on a feature to crop that out. However, even I believe prior to that, there's this weird thing that the game does, and again, I hate to point this out because I feel like maybe you might not have noticed it, and once I mention it, you will, and it might drive you insane. But for some reason, the screen constantly jitters up and down by like a pixel, and I really don't know what's causing that. When things are in motion, like right now when I'm playing the game jumping around, it doesn't seem like that noticeable. But like when the screen is completely still, I find that I really like start to notice it. But I don't really notice it. I didn't really notice it while I was playing the game, and it wasn't really until I'd already collected a good deal of footage that I figured out what that was, or rather even noticed that it was happening. And I still don't really know what it is, or why it is, because I'm almost certain Castlevania 64 didn't do that. I have to think it has something to do with like the expansion pack, graphical thing. I really don't know. But I'm going to do my best to ignore it and get back to talking about the game. And a problem that I often encounter when I make like the first commentary video about a certain game that I've been playing is that I feel like there's so much that I have to cover that I don't even know where to start. I already kind of covered the basics. But I think a good way to start talking about Legacy of Darkness in general is to talk about, is this the same game as Castlevania 64? Well, obviously no, because as you can see, we're playing as a character who is not in Castlevania 64, in a level that was not in Castlevania 64. That right there, I don't know. As you can tell, the targeting system still has some kinks to work out. One of the biggest improvements that was touted about Legacy of Darkness was the camera being fixed, because a lot of people had complaints about the camera in Castlevania 64, and to be totally honest, I don't really notice that much of a difference. I don't know. I have noticed that the camera tends to be closer to the character and like kind of angled further downward, which is a little bit annoying because it makes it hard to see what's going on. I don't know if that was done to try to keep a higher frame rate, because I have seen some footage of this game captured from Nintendo 64 consoles, where if you try to play it with like the expansion pack graphical enhancement, the frame rate is just like god-awful. But here, it's a pretty smooth... I don't know how many frames this is exactly, maybe 30? That's about what I would expect. I don't think it's 60. I really should be able to tell the difference just by looking at it, but I can't, because I'm stupid. So maybe that was... But anyway, but the end result is that it's harder to see like what's going on or what's going on ahead of you, and it's awkward to go from Castlevania 64 to that, so... Maybe the camera doesn't like swing around as much. Well, not maybe. It definitely doesn't. But at the same time, they solved some problems, but in the process they introduced new ones. And that is kind of like the story of Legacy of Darkness, is improvements. It's like for every every two things they improved, they made something worse compared to Castlevania 64. That's something of an exaggeration, but I'll talk more about that when we get into the late game, because the early game is mostly new, and so I should also explain why I'm a dog now. So Cornell is a neat character. He's more mobile than Reinhardt from Castlevania 64. He slides farther, he jumps farther, I'm fairly sure. And just moves faster, but he does much more damage than Carrie. Carrie Fernandez has to like charge up her projectiles. Combat with her is kind of awkward. Cornell has a basic attack. You press the B button, he attacks. He shoots like laser blades out of his arms that just kind of like hit whatever's in front of you. And and as good as that is, a potential downside of that would be, well, wouldn't that make sub-weapons redundant? Because what the sub-weapons do for you in Castlevania 64 is they basically just increase your range of influence. They don't give you access to new angles of attack the way that the sub-weapons would in 2D Castlevania games. They just kind of increase your effective range. But Cornell's effective range is already completely fine, so you might wonder, if sub-weapons aren't really that helpful for Cornell, then what's the point of picking up any jewels? Well, it's because that's what fuels his dog form. Cornell's dog form is pretty much like the centerpiece of him as a character. It's kind of the thing that it creates like the only elements of the game that are like long-term strategizing in the same way that you might strategize like item crash usages, for example, in like Dracula X or Rondo of Blood. Because the way the dog form works is Cornell needs at least 10 gems to activate dog form. While he's in dog form, he does way more damage, but his gems are constantly being drained, and dog form lasts until you're out of gems or until you trigger a cutscene. And I want you to remember that second thing I said, trigger a cutscene, because that's extremely important. And when I say his damage gets buffed, I mean it gets buffed by a lot. I don't know if you noticed that, but that boss that I fought back there on the bridge, the big Titanosaurus-looking motherfucker, that dude died in 4 hits. And I want you to, if you're a dedicated follower of my channel, I will eventually upload some Carrie Fernandez footage, because Carrie is also a playable character in this game. And just for fun, like, just compare what fighting that guy on Cornell looked like to what fighting that guy on Carrie is going to look like when I upload that footage, and just enjoy the contrast. That's all to say that Cornell is very Cornell has very high damage, especially in dog form. And I should also talk a little bit about the level that we're on right now. This is the Forest of Silence, which is much less silent than it was in Castlevania 64. And there are 3 kinds of levels in Legacy of Darkness. There are levels that are the same as levels in Castlevania 64. There are levels that are conceptually the same, but different in layout. And then there are totally new levels. And so far, we've got one totally new level and one level that's conceptually the same, but new in layout, that being this one. This is much shorter than the Castlevania 64 Forest of Silence, and not just because I'm taking this shortcut here, which will take me to the end of the level faster. One of my complaints about the Forest of Silence level in Castlevania 64 is that it went on way too long, and this is a direct address. This addresses that concern directly. They make it more varied. They cool it on the infinite respawning skeletons, and they make it not as long. So this is a level that I would say is an improvement on the Forest of Silence in Castlevania 64, although it does kind of lose. There's a little something, I don't know, the Forest of Silence in Castlevania 64 was very, like, it's hard to say exactly. It was like emblematic of that game. It was very memorable and very striking, because it went on for so long, and because there wasn't any music, and because it wasn't a very good level. So like with Legacy of Darkness, they did make it a better level, basically, but it's not quite as like, It doesn't stick in your mind the same way the Castlevania 64 Forest of Silence does, in my opinion, obviously. This boss fight is also very different than it is in Castlevania 64. He has this whole extra phase where he electrocutes himself and tries to breathe like poison breath at you. But otherwise it's the same like in concept. And I'm fairly sure I'm going for some kind of timing here, because in Castlevania 64... Oh, I should explain this too, actually, just kind of generally. So Castlevania 64 and Legacy of Darkness both have a day-night cycle. Wherein in-game time will cycle from daytime to nighttime and back again, go figure. And the practical consequences of this is that during nighttime, enemies will have more health. And that can be super important on boss fights, because that also applies to bosses. So if you can fight a boss during the daytime, you basically always want to, because it means that they're going to have significantly less health. And I'm fairly sure what I did when I played Castlevania 64 is I was trying to get to the Villa level, which is the third level in that game, fourth level in this game, on a particular timing. So I tried to do the first levels very fast. The fact that I took that shortcut back there through the forest indicates to me that I'm trying to do something similar here, but I don't quite remember what timing I'm going for, because the villa in Cornell is completely different from the villa for Reinhardt and Carrie. So we'll have to see. I think it has something to do with the castle wall, because the castle wall is different is another level that's like the layout is the same as it was in Castlevania 64, but just kind of the method you traverse it is a little bit different. So I would say it's almost identical. So I guess that's a fourth type of Castlevania, of Legacy of Darkness level. I think we're going to get another cutscene coming up here. Yeah, I think what I want to do is I want to get to the castle wall, because there's two doors. There's a sun door and a moon door. Sun doors can only be open during the day. Moon doors can only be open during the night, and I think what I want to do is clear out the sun door half towards the end of the day, so that way as soon as I'm finished with it, I can drop back down here and go through the moon door. He says yikes. Oh shit, who's this guy? Damn, why can't I do that? It's an awkwardly translated line. Yeah, I don't know. Now I'm really noticing this jittering, and I don't know what's causing it. So this is an interesting element, like world-building element, I guess, of Castlevania 64, which was completely not present in the original game. I guess there are werewolves out there. I guess there are dudes who can turn into monsters, and they live in a village somewhere. Oh shit. I don't know if it's supposed to get all pixelated like that. I don't know if those little rectangles are an intended part of the effect, or if it, like, fucked up. Yeah, that's a little bit more important than the particulars of when Dracula's gonna come back. And this, of course, is all different from Castlevania 64. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to do, was clear out the sunroom, and I want to get to the sunroom at like a really particular time, because there's a boss at the top of this. So I want to get to the top of this, kill the boss while it's still daytime, but then basically like as soon as I finish killing him, I want it to be nighttime. So I'm going for like a really, really particular timing here. And this part of the fucking castle wall is so weird, because I swear to God, sometimes I'll randomly get here and like half of these green platforms won't spawn. Like sometimes it'll be 2 green platforms bridging this divide, and sometimes it'll just be 1. And I never figured out what the cause of the difference was. I thought maybe it was like a hard mode thing. No, it's like I'd do one attempt of this game, and I'd get there and there would be 2 platforms, and then I'd do another attempt, and then there'd be 1 platform, like this, except for like all the previous ones. And I have no earthly idea what was causing that to happen. So one thing I will say about the camera in Legacy of Darkness, there were a few places where the camera was really improved, and this is one of them. Like, this won't mean anything to you if you haven't seen my Castlevania 64 footage, but like, this is so much better than the camera for this boss fight in Castlevania 64. It's like ridiculous. This is because this is exactly the angle you would want. This is like they actually tested the game and like tried playing it themselves to figure out what the best angle would be. And this is an interesting decision that I'm making to pick up all these gems. I guess I figure I might as well because it doesn't really make a difference. I'm gonna be out of dog form by the time I get to the next important combat section anyway. So I guess I might as well. I figure I just might as well keep it going to one shot that turret and then just leave it at that. And now what am I doing? I'm going back in. Oh yeah, right. I remember now. So yeah, because the way that you do this level in Castlevania 64 is you just go up to one tower, you pull the lever, go to the other tower, pull the lever, then you go to the villa level. But with Legacy of Darkness, one of the or the pulley, the thing at the top of the sun tower doesn't have a lever, so you have to clear the boss, go down into that central area, grab the lever from next to that turret, then go back up and put the lever on the sun tower, and then go to the moon tower, and then pull the lever there, if that makes any sense. Basically, that was so fucking close. I don't know what I was thinking there. I think I just had a hard time remembering which of these gaps was, like, the ones with the blades and which ones weren't, because they all kind of look the same. And it's even harder to tell when they're randomly variable, like when some of them have two platforms and some of them don't. Basically, to boil down everything I said about the towers and the levers and the levers and the towers, you have two choices. You can either do the moon tower twice, or the sun tower once, or the sun tower twice and the moon tower once. I would prefer to do the sun tower twice, because the sun tower has less complicated platforming. There's more enemies, but there's less platforming. The moon tower of the castle wall is the first part of the game, I would say. Well, for the first time for Cornell when you're really in danger of dying. Because the thing about that Titanosaurus boss at the underground lake is that thing can actually be fucking scary on some of the other characters. But for Cornell, the fact that he can kill it so fast means it's mostly not a problem. But it is kind of like the first major encourager, the first moment in the game that really significantly encourages you to use the dog form, because you basically just want that thing to be dead as quickly as possible. I picked up a cross there, but I don't really remember... Oh, no, I do remember why. It's because in the villa... So the way the villa plays out in Castlevania 64 is different from how it plays out in Legacy of Darkness, pretty much right from the start. It's kind of like this zone where the layout is the same, but the way you traverse it is different, except it's more different with the villa than it is with the castle wall. Specifically, when in Castlevania 64, there's a hedge maze in the villa level, which is like basically not a real environment. You basically spend, in Castlevania 64, you spend the entire time in the maze being chased through the maze, so you don't really get any chances to explore it or traverse it or walk around in it. You're just kind of running through it the whole time, like barely seeing anything that's there. In Legacy of Darkness, they changed that. You go to the maze... There is a chase through the maze eventually, but at first you have a chance to walk through the maze once normally and sort of actually appreciate the environment a little bit, which is nice. And that's kind of I would say the single biggest improvement the Legacy of Darkness made over Castlevania 64 is the hedge maze, at least in Cornell's story, because in the Carrie Reinhardt mode it's exactly the same, unfortunately. They kind of botched the opportunity to fix that. I don't really have any problems with the castle wall or with the Cornell villa or with the first half of Cornell's story is basically fine. But I'm going to have some complaints when we get to the second half. one thing that's nice about Cornell mode is that so Carrie and Reinhardt have levels that are exclusive to them in Castlevania 64 called the tunnels for Reinhardt and then the waterways for Carrie, and both of those levels are pretty bad, but neither of those levels are present in Cornell mode. And most shockingly is the fact that there's no castle center level in Cornell's story. And I realize that's not going to mean anything to you if you're not familiar with Castlevania 64, so I probably should not spend so much time on the comparisons, but that's just kind of what my mind is going to. And plus, it is a common question people ask about this game: is it the same game as Castlevania 64? And I'm trying to illustrate or explain the ways in which it is different. So with this Cerberus fight, Cornell doesn't really have any problems that any other character wouldn't have. That was really good. That's kind of the only way to do that fight without taking damage, is to try to hit both of them at the same time and just kind of hope they sync up like that. Because otherwise you'll end up in a situation where you have to hit one of them to interrupt their charge, and then while you hit one of them, the second one runs around you and hits you. So I always felt like there was something about these Cerberus enemies that I wasn't getting. This is a great place to use the dog form. This is like perfect for exactly the reason I just explained. Because you want these guys to die fast, and if they don't do exactly what you want them to do, then it's very easy for them to kill you. Another innovation in Legacy of Darkness that I think was really, really good was the fact that sub-weapons, and the way sub-weapons work in Castlevania 64, is like you pick up a sub-weapon, and then you just have it, and then that's it. But for Legacy of Darkness, they changed it so that if you pick up the same sub-weapon again, if you have a sub-weapon and you pick up the same sub-weapon again, you get a stronger version of that sub-weapon. So it's kind of like how power-up drops will buff your standard attack. It's like picking up more sub-weapons will buff your sub-weapons. And that's great for me, because I'm doing these like deathless runs. I actually get to take advantage of that. And I should also state for the record, because this is important, that this is a deathless run, but this is actually not one segment. This is done in two segments. It's start of the game up to the end of the castle wall, I believe, and then or up to the end of the inner castle wall, which is not the level we just saw. It's a different level, and then from there to the end of the game. And that was for reasons. And I'm going to explain those reasons when we get to the later half of the game, because it has to do with the later half of the game. Excuse me, sorry. Man, sorry, I just ate. The hedge maze was really I'm very glad that they did this, because this is a neat environment. It's very like thematic. It's very evocative. It's a classic kind of horror movie, dare I say, type environmental set piece. Like whenever I get to this part of the game, I always think of The Shining. And Castlevania 64 this is why I wanted the cross, because of these guys. Cornell's wind blades have a pretty long range, but they're not as long range as the cross. And these guys, if they hit you, will poison you, which in Legacy of Darkness deals ticking damage, I think, perpetually. And also might nerf your attack, although I'm not 100% sure about that. So you really, really don't want to get poisoned, because cure ampules are relatively rare. And so for that reason, I'd rather not try to fuck with the attack patterns of the slimes. I'd rather just sort of stand at a perfectly safe distance and then just throw across that. And these snakes are fucking running wild. I don't know. I guess it makes... Well, does it make sense to have snakes here? Well, whether it does or it doesn't, I guess it doesn't matter. Yeah, hedge maze. So this is like my favorite change they made in Legacy of Darkness, was turning the hedge maze into an actual level that you navigate through. Because like I said before, the way this level plays out in Castlevania 64 is you're basically just running through it. And any attempts to wander around or explore the dead ends or enjoy the atmosphere would basically just result in death. But here they actually give you a chance to, I don't know why I'm not just throwing the fucking cross at this guy. That's kind of the whole reason I picked it up. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in this level that I would be using the cross for. Well, there is another chase. There is a chase through the maze in Legacy of Darkness a little bit later, but that's relatively leisurely compared to the Castlevania 64 chase. And I should have enough gems for that when I get to it. So I think it was a little bit risky for me to try to fuck with the slime instead of just crossing it to death. And sometimes there's a slime here too. This time it's a turret. Okay. Yeah, weird variants. There's weird variants in Legacy of Darkness. Listen to that silence. Just pure atmosphere, man. Misty pathways through the hedge maze. With nothing but the sound of your own footsteps. This is like where this game really excels. There are some things that I think Legacy of Darkness really drops the ball on compared to Castlevania 64, but they really got the atmosphere right. And the villa was like my favorite level from Castlevania 64, one of my favorite levels. And this is basically a better version of that. So this is probably my favorite level in Legacy of Darkness. I can't think of anything that would supersede that. No, actually, this is definitely my favorite level in Legacy of Darkness now, because I'm remembering more things that happen in it. It's been a little while since I collected this footage, so some of the things that are going to happen are going to surprise me, I think. Oh, including this. I forgot that this happened already. So I think I waited to fight this guy because I want to say it was nighttime when I first got here, and I wanted to see if maybe it would be daytime by the time I got through the hedge maze. And it is daytime, okay. Yeah, vampires get seriously nerfed during the daytime. It seems like it's much more of a dramatic difference than with a lot of other enemies. So I could have triggered that fight when I first walked into the villa, but because it was nighttime, I didn't want to. I thought maybe I could wait to fight that guy until later, so that's what I did. Why am I using a sun card? Now this is very strange. I don't actually remember why I'm doing this. Oh, I remember why. It's because there's a key. There's a key you can get in this room, but you can only get it during sunrise, which is 6 a.m. The hour of 6 a.m. So that's why I was doing that. Okay, okay. Unlike in Castlevania 64 and unlike in Legacy of Darkness with the Carrie and Reinhardt routes, there are no different endings in Legacy of Darkness. So I don't have to worry, because in Castlevania 64 there's a bad ending that you can get if you take too many in-game days to finish the game. There's nothing like that in Legacy of Darkness, so I can use sun cards and moon cards with total impunity. Look at this fucked up dude. Cornell's not too bright, huh? This guy's clearly like a fucking monster. Maybe that's just what the average Eastern European looks like. Oh shit. Now that is a cool vampire form. I always like that. Wow, I didn't remember doing that much damage. That was almost a one-shot. That's actually insane. Yeah, that's just like an illustration of how much fucking damage Cornell mode does. Hello, ma'am, I'm a dog. I guess if she's gotten used to being around a vampire, then Cornell coming in with like a werewolf mode on doesn't really bother her. Woof. I'll do it for some bacon strips. A secret path through the forest. The copper key. I will give you the copper key. Demons. I feel like there's a particular Japanese word being translated there because there was a bit in the opening text crawl. It's so fucking funny to watch Cornell like walk around with his dog face like opening doors. For some reason that really cracks me up. I don't know why. There's a bit in the opening text crawl that always seems strange to me, which is that it says Ada was carried away by evil spirits, but she was carried away by skeletons, which are evil, but I don't really associate the word spirit with something corporeal. When I hear spirits, I think like ghosts. And this is an interesting decision, actually, to go this way and leave dog form on, because there's a cutscene that I could be triggering elsewhere in the villa to get out of dog form, but I guess I just don't care. I like this part. The archives in Castlevania 64 were weird because I always expected that I'd be going in there to like learn something or read something. But that's not the case. You just go in there to get a key in Castlevania 64. Here they actually gave you something to read, which is nice. But what that diary is actually a clue for a puzzle later on, which I'll point out when we get to it. Yeah, these guys are really good for getting jewels. I don't really know... I don't know why I didn't trigger this cutscene earlier. Where is it? There it is. I guess I just didn't... I guess I just figured it didn't matter, because it really doesn't matter. I'm not going to turn into a dog again until the boss fight for this, for this level, and that fight is going to be over super fast. So I didn't want to like go out of my way. I didn't want to like jump down here, trigger the cutscene, then run back up the stairs, run to the archives, and then run back down again. Aha. So this guy's the merchant in this game. And another difference between Legacy of Darkness and Castlevania 64 that I think is actually really smart is that the prices for everything are much higher, which is good because one of the downsides of Castlevania 64, one of the ways in which the game was too easy, was that it was very easy to hoard healing items by just buying a bunch of them from the merchant because they weren't that expensive. Here, they jacked up the price to counteract that. One of the things about Castlevania 64 that I said multiple times is that, kind of like Super Castlevania 4, actually, the platforming is the only major hazard. But I think Legacy of Darkness tried to counteract that, mostly in the boss fights. The bosses tend to hit pretty hard when they actually hit you. And there's going to be a big example of that when we get to the late game, but again, I'm going to have to talk about that more when we get there. That's funny. The reason I started running to the right there is because in Castlevania 64, you get spit out of that doorway at a particular camera angle that that's set up so that you would want to go right first. But in Legacy of Darkness, they tried to make the camera be directly behind you much more often to make movement more, holy shit, movement more consistent. And fun fact about that Frankenstein model, apparently that Frankenstein model is the only in-game remnants of that other playable character I was talking about who got cut from C64, what was his name? Collar? Apparently he was going to be like a big dude with a shotgun, which would have been fucking sick, but he didn't make it into the game, and they just tweaked his model and used it for the Frankenstein enemy there. So just like in Castlevania 64, you have to escort a little shit through the maze. But this is crucially different in several ways. It's slower, which sounds bad, but the game was also kind enough to make the enemies slower to compensate. Well, she talked to me. I was a dog at the time. I think it's because of cutscenes like this that they automatically cancel your dog form in cutscenes, because it would be far too funny for Cornell to engage in that whole cutscene while he was like a werewolf man. What's funny is that I actually didn't even know about dog form the first time I played through this game. I was like really mad because on the box art and all over like all the promotional material for Legacy of Darkness, it's like dog, 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 dog. And then I played through the whole game and I'm like, where the fuck was the dog? And then I remembered. Then I thought to actually look at like the control layout in like a I found like a PDF of the instruction book and I saw L button dog form. Oh. And the reason I didn't know that has to do with like the particular way you would hold an N64 controller. Basically, your hand would never naturally be near the L button if you were playing a 3D game on the N64, which is good because you really wouldn't want to accidentally trigger the werewolf form because of the fact that it's so the only way to get rid of it would be to run out of hearts, which is not what you want. Oh, I only have 5 gems here, so I guess maybe I actually should have saved some up. Maybe gotten some more. If I had triggered the Renon cutscene first, I would have had more gems to deal with that guy. So maybe I should have done that. Obviously it didn't end up mattering, but that could have been annoying. The Bone Dragon boss on the castle wall dropped a lot of like anti-poison cures. So even if I do get poisoned, it's not the end of the world. And yeah, as you can see, this is what I mean when I say it's slow. That kid is slow as fuck, but Frankenstein is also slow as fuck, and he doesn't have his dogs with him the way that he does in C64, so... It's, despite the fact that much more exciting music is playing, it's not really as exciting. But that's okay. I'm fine with that, because I think that the original chase was disproportionately punishing. It was bad... I don't know why I laughed. I don't know why I hear a kid saying "help me" behind the sound of like a chainsaw rev, and my first impulse is to laugh. I guess there's just like something wrong with my brain. That's good because I think the C64 chase was kind of unfairly punishing. You'd hesitate for 1 second, or you could go like down one wrong path, and you'd just like get rooted by a dog, and then Frankenstein would like zoom up to you and slice you in half with his chainsaw. And Frankenstein moves like fast as fuck in Castlevania 64. It's actually insane how fast he is when he really feels like motoring. What the fuck? Where is he? Oh, he got stuck behind a pillar. Yeah, I guess that's another reason why it's good for this part to be slow, because it gives you plenty of time to go help the fucking NPCs get unstuck if their pathing gets fucked up. Frankenstein, sometimes when he gets temporarily disabled like that, he'll drop something, but it's usually not worth getting it. Because the thing is that even though bosses in Legacy of Darkness are more dangerous, healing items are not helpful for the toughest part, which, again, I'm going to have to wait to explain what I mean by that, because it involves the final boss, and kind of the quirks of that encounter. Because the thing is that, like, in Castlevania 64, the final boss also was very punishing and could hit you for a lot of damage, but in Castlevania 64, healing items are so plentiful that you would never not, like, be able to heal the damage off. Sometimes there's a Cerberus around this corner. Let's see if he shows up. Yep. Again, it's another weird, like, sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen thing, where... sometimes he's there, sometimes he's not there. This is actually kind of risky. I should probably turn around and make sure that Frankenstein's not coming. Okay, well, I guess it worked out. Don't just leave the door open, are you fucking crazy? Well, actually, Frankenstein probably can't fit through it, so I guess that's okay. If I could walk that way... I wouldn't need that pendant. So Henry there, little blonde kid, is the fourth playable character in Legacy of Darkness. Kind of the conceptual evolution of Collar. Instead of a shotgun, he just has like a revolver, which sounds pretty fun. But Henry mode in this game is like not the same as the other main modes. I'm gonna wait to talk about that because I have footage of it, of course, and I'll upload it and talk about it then. Just wanted to point that out. These fucking skeletons on motorcycles. That was one thing that I was really worried about. Because I think that the fight against the big skeleton in the Forest of Silence is much better in Legacy of Darkness than it is in Castlevania 64. But in Castlevania 64, the giant skeleton fight opens with two motorcycle skeletons coming out from the netherworld generated by the camera and blindsiding you, which is funny, but it's bad game design. And so when I fought the giant skeleton and the motorcycle skeletons didn't show up, on the one hand I was like, well, that's better design because it means that you can actually fight the boss and you can actually see what's going on. But does that mean there will not be any motorcycle skeletons in this game? That would be an unforgivable omission. But fortunately they showed up. Honestly, if this game did not have the motorcycle skeletons in it, I would dock some serious points off of it and maybe even say it's not as good as Castlevania 64. Because the thing is that, like, you know, when I played Castlevania 64, and when I wrote about Excuse me, sorry guys. Man. Maybe I should wait a little bit. I should wait for longer after I eat to start doing these commentaries, huh? When I talked about Castlevania 64, when I wrote about Castlevania 64 in my YouTube description, I was very, very positive towards the game. And a big part of why I was so positive was because my expectations were just, like, at the rock bottom. Like, everything I'd heard about Castlevania 64 made it sound terrible. So when I sat down and played it, and I'm like, this is actually, like, pretty good, all things considered. Oh yeah, this is the puzzle that I read the diary to figure out, because it mentions his wife first, then his son, and then it just says anyone else, and so you have to do the tombstones in that order. But before you do those three ones, you have to do the one over there. I guess because his name is mentioned at the top of the diary first. And this is necessary to get the second half of a crest to enter the door to the boss room. So, like I said before, the villa level is different in Cornell mode, and it's more involved, and it's better, basically. The Henry escort is slower than the kid chase in C64, but it's fairer. It's less frustrating. It feels more like you're playing a game and less like you're you know what it feels like in Castlevania 64? It feels like you're actually being chased by someone who's trying to kill you. Which sounds like it could be a positive, but that's not really an experience that you would seek out necessarily in a video game. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, imagine like if you get jump scared, you're like playing like a horror game. Imagine like getting jump scared and thinking that you're actually going to die. Like, on the one hand, obviously that's good, because that's what the developer, that's the most intense version of what the developer would want you to feel. But on the other hand, do you really want to feel that? That's why I could never play a game like Five Nights at Freddy's or something. Because, like, I could play a creepy game, I could play, like, Silent Hill or something, but anything with jump scares, I just can't fucking handle, man. Because the thing is that, like, I'm a pretty jumpy person in real life. Like, if I hear any sudden loud noise that's unexpected, I get super freaked out. So trying to play one of those games would probably just kill me. What was I talking about? Five Nights at Freddy's. Yeah, this is gonna be my impromptu review of Five Nights at Freddy's, a game I've never played. No, I was talking about Cornell mode. I was talking about... Oh yeah, expectations. So Castlevania 64, low expectations, positive reception. So when I got into Legacy of Darkness, it was kind of the other way around, where Castlevania 64 had been surprising to me, like pleasantly surprising. So when everything I'd read about Legacy of Darkness, everybody's saying, "Oh, Legacy of Darkness is just this flat upgrade, like it fixes all the problems with C64." I was expecting this game to be like really good. I was expecting this to be like I don't know, like on the same level as like, this is gonna sound insane, but on the same level as like Aria of Sorrow or something. Because I would say Castlevania 64 is roughly on par with like Portrait of Ruin or like Belmont's Revenge. Um, I'm sure some of you just like sat up straight in your chair and said, "Shovitar, what the fuck are you talking about?" when I said Castlevania 64 is on par with Portrait of Ruin, but I have my reasons. This fight's pretty cool. I like how dynamic the camera is, except for when it decides to stare at a wall, but as is often the case with Cornell, he just fucking shits on him. And he dies in 4 hits because of dog form. Well, he is, but I guess he's a super powerful man-wolf, right? Because he can turn back and forth at will, kind of. He can turn into a dog at will, but he can't cancel it at will. At least I don't think he can. Mysterious. What was that all about? Yeah, dude, that's you. That's when you turn into a dog and you go batshit and you four-shot bosses. But my point is, I was expecting Legacy of Darkness to be like significantly better than Castlevania 64, and when all is said and done, when I weigh the improvements uh, over the mistakes, I would say it ultimately comes out to just be slightly better than Castlevania 64. Um, and I'm gonna have to. And so I feel like most of what I've said so far has been positive. So you'll see what I mean when I talk about mistakes when we get to the second half, because it's in the second half of the run that things really start to get rough. Right away, though, this is like bad. You should never make a player do this in a video game. There's nothing fun about slowly inching your way across a tiny ledge, because all you're doing is you just spend like 10 seconds doing the same thing that's very, very boring. So this is bad, and this shouldn't be in the game. But this is an extremely minor complaint compared to what I'm going to get to later. This level's pretty neat. This is the level that Cornell has instead of the tunnels or the waterway. I would say it's probably better than the tunnels or the waterway. Um, the tunnels is kind of bland, and the waterway has some very frustrating platforming segments. This one's like much more straightforward. Like, look at this room. This room is so Castlevania. I'm pretty sure Cornell can slide under those, but I'm not totally sure about that. There were times when I was practicing this game, there were times when I was sliding. I couldn't really tell if I was sliding under the saw blades or just sliding past them too fast for them to get to me. Because of the perspective that I was at, I wasn't sure if I was dodging them or if I was avoiding them. Dodging and avoiding are the same thing. I wasn't sure if I was under them or next to them, is what I mean to say. I like this music, although I don't like it as much as the Waterways music. And this level is kind of missing, like... The tunnel and the waterways are more obnoxiously designed as levels, but they do have more of a character to them. This is kind of... I don't know. I think they're trying to do kind of a thematic, like, jumping across rooftops thing. Which I guess they kind of succeed at. Oh boy, we're doing this again. I mean, I guess it's supposed to be tense, right? It's supposed to be like exciting, but there's no there's no like way you could fuck this up except by letting go of the A button, which you would never do. except to sit down on this ledge and grab... What am I grabbing? Moon card. The reason I'm grabbing that moon card is because the level immediately after this... So normally the way that it goes in Castlevania 64 is you do the tunnels or the waterway, then you go to the castle center. And the castle center is like a really long level in Castlevania 64. What they gave Cornell instead of the castle center was two entirely new levels called the Art Tower and the Tower of Ruins. Both pretty bad. Which again, I'll elaborate more when we get to them, which should be pretty shortly. But I'm bringing this up now because the Art Tower's whole gimmick is using sun and moon cards to access rooms. So I want to have kind of a comfortable buffer of sun cards and moon cards before I go in there. The Art Tower is very good about giving you more sun and moon cards, but I just want to make sure that I'm never in a position where I don't have what I need. So that's also part of why I went out of my way to pick up moon cards when they dropped from the Bone Dragon boss in the castle wall. This is an axe, right? Yeah. I remember it now, but I didn't remember it when I was actually playing the game. Go figure. Yeah, I guess this level does have its own identity. It just kind of feels like the castle wall again, which is because it's a castle wall again, but it's a different castle wall. It's an outside castle wall instead of an inside castle wall. But it's nice and leisurely. I appreciate it. I feel like almost no combat has happened. Or I feel like are there any enemies in this level? I'm thinking. I just watched the footage back. I don't think there are any enemies here. Well, there's a boss that I'm going to come up to in a second, but other than that, I don't think there are any like regular enemies. I guess that's different. So the boss here is another boss fight that's immediately followed up by a cutscene, so I'm going to go into dog form again instantly and just shit all over this thing. So one of the things about Castlevania 64 the people consistently complained about in reference to the camera was that the bad camera made combat awkward. I think Legacy of Darkness was more confident in its ability to let you see the things that are attacking you. Hence the fact that this boss is going to be like flying all around the platform. And also, hence the giant orange use lock-on suggestion that's going to pop up whenever it gets out of my field of vision. And yeah, that was 3 shots, so... Not exactly very threatening. That's kind of the power of dog form. Rest in peace. What's crazy is that's about as hard to kill as like an actual harpy enemy in a regular Castlevania game. That's not true. Harpies usually get one shot in Castlevania games. Anyway, I think this is right before the Art Tower, so I think this is the first break. Yep, okay, first break. Last of the good times before the problems begin. And here we go. So, the first of the 2 Cornell exclusive levels is the Art Tower, and like I briefly mentioned before, the gimmick for this level is that there are certain doors that can only be opened in the daytime and in the nighttime. And the way that plays out in practice is that you have to use sun cards and moon cards to open the doors, so it's a lot of menuing, it's a lot of inventory shit. Those gold knights with the swords will respawn whenever you leave and come back out of a room. Which is good because those guys drop sun and moon cards at a very high rate. They basically always drop either a sun card or a moon card. So you can sometimes be in a situation where like you need a moon card but they're only dropping sun cards or vice versa, which is why it's important to have a good stockpile of to have like 1 or 2 of each of them before you go in. Which is why I went out of my way to get a couple of them before the level started. I don't really know how many of each you need exactly. I wasn't going for like a specific number. I just kind of picked them up if I saw them and then went from there. I have to adjust my microphone. Okay, I gotta remember to cut that. I'll actually remember to do it this time. So, the second half of the game... second half of Cornell's story is rough. I think they were struggling to come up with stuff like the whole sun card moon card usage gimmick in the art tower. I don't really get it. Like, I don't get what the point is. I guess it's to illustrate to the player more concretely, like, that the sun and moon cards exist and that they're in the game and that you can use them. But the way that the level plays out in practice is that there's just a couple of platforming challenges, and then you have to open the menu a lot. So it's not super interesting. And I also want to point out this music right here. This music, I just remembered today, actually, excuse me, that this music first appeared in Castlevania Bloodlines. Because when I was playing this game, I was thinking of this music as the Circle of the Moon music, because this song also appears in Circle of the Moon, although I can't actually remember where. One of the interior areas of Circle of the Moon, well, most of Circle of the Moon is in the interior, somewhere in the middle of the castle. Anyway, but in Castlevania Bloodlines, this was the level 2 Athens music. And it's unfortunate that my strongest the strongest association that I had with it in my memory was with Circle of the Moon and not Castlevania Bloodlines, so that kind of added... I'm not a big fan of this track, but also, as I was playing this level, I was thinking about Circle of the Moon, which made me sad. I mean, it's a nice enough looking level. As far as really the areas of Castlevania 64 and Legacy of Darkness that are the most effective are like the atmosphere and the environments. And as far as that goes, you know, here's what I'll say. For a level called the Art Tower, not that much art in it. Like, I was expecting a lot more paintings. Like, I was thinking about level 7 from Chronicles, where, like, so in Castlevania 1, the last hallway before the Grim Reaper fight has all these, like, paintings in it, and in Castlevania 1, the paintings are empty. But in Chronicles, they actually, like, filled out the paintings, and it's a really interesting ending to the level, because that whole level in Chronicles is really cool. But the point that I'm making, you don't want to go off on a tangent about Chronicles, is that I think they could have played up the art aspect of the Art Tower a little bit more. The thing is that, yes, they felt more confident with the combat and with the camera in general. Do you guys hear that? You know, I stopped having my sound machine, because I have like a white noise machine that I turn on at night, and I sometimes turn it on during my commentaries, but I stopped doing that because, like, the microphone was picking it up, and I didn't know how to get it to not do that. So now it's just me talking, so I specifically stopped using the white noise machine so that way there wouldn't be any, like, weird background noise. You wouldn't have, like, the whole video with me talking and this constant boom. But instead, I'm getting stuff like that. Oh well. Oh well. That's just how it is. Anyway, so, yeah, so they were more confident with the combat, they were more confident with the camera. I think they were more confident to include more challenges. And the Art Tower, I would say, only really has one part that's particularly tricky, and it's coming up in a moment here. But again, the larger point that I'm making is that the gameplay in Castlevania 64 and Legacy of Darkness tends to be pretty basic, where the challenge that comes... Again, there are a couple of exceptions to this in some of the boss fights, but the challenge that comes has more to do with like tricky platforming, and then the appeal of the game centrally is in the environment and in the atmosphere. And I think there's just a little bit something missing from the Art Tower. It's not a very long level. This and the level right after it are relatively short. I guess there's some paintings and statues in here, but I was kind of expecting a little bit more of that. A little bit less, like, I don't know. There has to be more going on than just platforming for me to be interested. Like there has to be something going on with the environments that's cool, or the atmosphere, or the music. Castlevania 64, a lot of the music in Castlevania 64 and Legacy of Darkness is very ambient and very low-key, which is not really the kind of music I prefer. I tend to prefer the music from the classic Castlevanias because they're more high speed and high energy just because of the nature of the gameplay. It wouldn't make sense for a game that's paced like Legacy of Darkness to have, you know, like to be blasting techno beats the whole time or something. But the consequence of that is that the music in and of itself is not super interesting to me. So this is the only part of the art tower that I'd say is really tricky, and it's tricky for the worst reasons, because it involves the camera. Yeah, so that's a trick where if you hold, I think it's the up yellow arrow, it'll move the camera into like first person. And then you can hit R to center the camera directly behind you, or directly behind whatever you decide to look at. But as you can see there, I was actually like drifting over to the right a little bit, so it's funny. It's like, I get the feeling they were slightly too confident with, this is another part where the cross is important, because I really want to kill both of these guys from a position of safety, that being at the start of the room. And I think I'm going to try to go for that. Am I going to try to go for that gem, or I'm just going to ignore it? I think I should just ignore it. That jump onto the track is tricky, by the way, because it's really, really easy to overshoot it and fall down onto the path below. So as you can see, pretty short. Great. A lot of these guys out today, huh? I don't know if you heard that last one. More fucking loud cars. The thing is that, like, it's not like cars driving by under normal circumstances doesn't get picked up. It's people who have loud fucking cars. Anyway, so Tower of Ruins. Kind of similar to the art. Well, it's paced differently, I would say. As you can see, the gimmick of the level is that you have to walk through all these, like, sort of identical rooms, or very similar looking rooms, and it's kind of like a maze, like figuring out, you have to get to 3 different switches to open the way to new parts of the level, and go from there. And unlike the art tower, the Tower of Ruins is longer. There's 3 like main sections, and they're all pretty involved. I would say I like the Tower of Ruins better. Of the 2 Cornell exclusive stages, I'd say this is the better one. I like the music better. I like the sort of Egyptian desert aesthetic, the hieroglyphics on the wall or whatever. I mean, it does kind of beg the question of what this is doing in Dracula's castle, right? The art tower, you could argue Dracula likes paintings, or somebody in Dracula's castle likes paintings, if it's Death or Dracula or whoever. I'm not sure what this is all about, though. Maybe somebody likes ruins. Maybe it's like, maybe there's a like a vampire under Dracula's command who was like an archaeologist when he was alive, and he wants to like do more archaeology, but there's no real ruins around for him to go to, so he just like built ruins to then dig stuff up out of. That's probably it. Yeah, this is an interesting music track, because the credits for Castlevania 64 plays they play the Castle Center music. It's kind of like the main theme of Castlevania 64, but then it's a longer version of it that incorporates more beats, and like the drums that you're hearing in this song were originally only in the credits version of the Castle Center music from Castlevania 64, but here they're like part of their own song. So the credits music, it was like an incorporation of 2 different songs. One of the 2 songs it incorporated wasn't in C64. It was only in Legacy of Darkness, which is neat. Yeah, I don't know. I'm having a hard time figuring out. I just think a lot of these environments are very simple. I think they could have used a little bit more flavor. Like the villa. Like, think about the villa, right? The villa is so richly detailed, and so it's unique, in a good way. The second half of the Cornell story has you going through a gauntlet of levels that all feel like pretty, well, I was gonna say feel pretty similar. I think I'm gonna have to retract that. They feel different, but there's no like. Okay, let me like chart this out. So you start off in the underground lake, or the not the underground lake, the Misty Lake or whatever. And when I think of the Misty Lake, I think of like the Titanosaurus boss. I think of like combat. Then the castle wall has like a mix of like there's some combat with a boss, but it's mostly platforming. Then you get to, or then prior to that, there's the Forest of Silence, which is also mostly like combat. If you take the shortcut anyway, there's more platforming if you don't, of course. Then the villa is its own thing that helps kind of like break up the level, the outer wall or the inner wall or whatever is all platforming, no combat. But then towards the back half of the game, you have to do this gauntlet of basically just platforming with no... Well, I guess that's not... The problem is that if a level has like combat and then also has challenging platforming, what I remember is the platforming. Like the Legacy of Darkness version of the Dual Tower. The Dual Tower in Castlevania 64 was like specifically a combat section with like a little bit of platforming that was mostly pretty simple. But Legacy of Darkness decided that they would make the platforming in the Dual Tower more complicated, so it, even though it is mostly a combat section, it... Oh, I remember this. So the reason I'm stopping here is because while I was collecting this footage, I was sick as fuck. I was tearing through like a tissue box in 2 days. I was blowing my nose constantly. I don't even know what the fuck it was. I think it was like... I don't know if it was allergies or if it was like I caught something. I don't know what it was, but I was so fucking sick. And I think I sneezed and had to like grab a tissue to like clean myself up. So that's what's going on here. That's why I'm just sitting here AFK. You get to see Cornell's cool little AFK animation at least. God, that was so miserable. And it's crazy because like I have not gotten sick. Like before this summer, I can't even remember the last time I got like really sick. Like sick that to the point that I like couldn't sleep. But this summer I've just been like, it was like this bizarre period of time of like 3 weeks where it was like I spent a week and I was just like sick as fuck, and then I'd be okay for like half a week, and then after like that half a week was up, I'd just get like sick I just like get sick again, and I to this day have no idea what was causing it. But it was really, really frustrating because because I can't do commentaries while I'm like super congested. I think I always sound a little bit congested because I frequently am a little bit congested, but like if I have to stop every 30 fucking seconds to blow my nose, I can't sit down and do a commentary, right? Or if I have like a sore throat from like post-nasal drip or whatever, and it like it hurts to talk or something, I can't do a commentary, and that's like so frustrating because I just... Even when I'm... Like, I've never been in that position before where I'm so sick that I can't do something that I want to do. Because most of what I like to do in my spare time is just, like, you know, play video games or other stuff that mostly just involves me being at the computer, not really having to talk or interact with anybody. But then, like... this summer when I started getting this crazy allergy shit, it was like the first time in my life when I was sick, and the fact that I was sick was actually really, really bad because there was stuff that I wanted to do that I couldn't get done. That's part of the reason why, that's the biggest reason why actually I don't have any commentary for the hard mode carry footage from Castlevania 64, partially because although Legacy of Darkness is not the same game as Castlevania 64, you do kind of end up covering a lot of the same ground, and I feel like I would probably end up saying a lot of the same things. But the bigger reason is just because I was sick, and I got behind for that reason. Like, I was planning to do a certain number of commentaries over a certain span of time, but then, like, I just couldn't do them, and I just fell behind again, which is unfortunate. Oh, I should probably explain this bit. So you have to jump on the pillars that have the right symbol. If you don't, if you pick the wrong pillar, then it collapses and then you fall to your death. So this is just a simple matter of memorizing which ones were right. Well, actually, no, it's not that. It's not that arbitrary, because if you walk around the room down there, there's like a circular path around the room, and it'll show you what the right symbols are. You can like see them on the wall in the correct order. So But rather than do that, I decided that I would actually just draw little pictures of what each of the correct runes were, and then just have that as a reference point. It's pretty fun. It's always fun whenever like you can do anything in a video game that involves like writing stuff down on paper or like drawing little diagrams. I know that's something people recommend a lot with the original Metroid from '86. Is it '86? You know what I mean. The one on NES. Is people recommend like if you're going in, playing it for the first time, you should like draw your own map on a sheet of paper or something because there's no map screen. And because a lot of the rooms in that game are apparently pretty samey. Anyway, here we are in like the real tricky... We're really in the part of Legacy of Darkness that's rough for me. In Castlevania 64, after the Castle Center, Reinhardt has the Dual Tower and the Tower of Execution, and then Carrie has the Tower of Science and the Tower of Sorcery. For some reason, not for some reason. So with Cornell, I guess they figured, well, we don't want him to do the Castle Center, because the Castle Center is like very specific to the storyline of Castlevania 64, and this is supposed to be a prequel. So we'll make 2 new levels for that, but then what do we do afterwards? And because they have these 4 tower levels, and instead of the question being, I don't know, maybe at some point they thought they would pick 2 of them, but then couldn't pick which of the 2 to do, or maybe they wanted Cornell's story in Legacy of Darkness to be sort of like a holistic experience, like if you never played any of the other modes, if you just played Cornell's story, because Cornell is sort of like the centerpiece of this game. This way, doing his campaign lets you see all 4 of the redesigned tower levels, because all the levels I just mentioned, Dual Tower, Tower of Execution, Sorcery, and Science, they were all like redesigned for Legacy of Darkness. Each of them, in my opinion, redesigned to be worse, which I'll talk about more when we get to them, except for the Tower of Execution. I'd say the Legacy of Darkness Tower of Execution is better, but all the other ones, ultimately, I do not like as much, which I'll explain when I get there. The Tower of Science, for what you've seen so far, is actually pretty similar. The bit with the conveyor belts is very similar to what you see in Castlevania 64. Now we're getting into the parts that are really different. And it's not this... I'll talk about the part that I have a problem with when we get to it. But the point that I'm making is that the end of Legacy of Darkness is, like, brutal, because you have to go through the 4 hardest levels in the game all in a row. Like... Science, Dual, Tower of Execution, Tower of Sorcery. Then you have to do a Clock Tower, which has been expanded on since Castlevania 64. But the Clock Tower isn't really super difficult. Yeah, this is another important usage of the cross, is killing that turret before you, so you can just slide right under these grates and not worry about it. I could be using the cross actually also to kill these guys. They probably would have died if I just threw a cross at them. And I think I'm kind of saving up my hearts, because there is a boss fight at the end of the Tower of Science, although it's fairly underwhelming. Okay, yeah, this is the part that I really don't like. It's not that bad on normal mode, but on hard mode, and it's not that bad if you're playing as Carrie, but if you're playing as Cornell, it creates some problems. Basically, if you get hit by... Yeah, that's what happens. The issue that I have with this really just has to do with, like, the limitations of your, of how much you can see at any given point in time. Like, there's a specific window that the game wants you to go on when you're playing as Cornell, and it can be hard to tell, like, when exactly that is, because these turrets always have such, like, variable patterns. Yeah, and I guess it's mostly about, like, going when you can either slide under or jump over one stream of bullets. And for Cornell, it's mostly going to be sliding, because his slide takes him super far. The difference, by the way, between that part of the game for Cornell and Carrie is that if Cornell slides into a stream of bullets that's on the lower rail, he will get hit by them. But Carrie is actually so small that all the bullets go right over her, so that part is much easier on Carrie. This part is also okay. This part kind of reminds me of the precision platforming and the Tower of Science in C64, the big difference is that the laser guns are a little bit cooler than the machine guns, and also there's no death pit under you. If you fall down here, you take a bunch of fall damage, but you don't literally instantly die, which is a difference maker. And I guess I would have to list that as a positive. But something about the environment, I think maybe it's too bright. Because the Tower of Science in Castlevania 64 was very, like, dimly lit. Almost like a warehouse or something. I feel like this room is a little bit too bright, and it's kind of the laser beams are neat, but there was something about the machine guns in the Tower of Science and C64 that felt a little bit more I guess in keeping with the industrial theme, where it's like machine guns. Obviously they didn't have machine guns in 1850, at least I don't think they did. No, they didn't. But it's like closer to something that like to a technological innovation that was actually around the corner, whereas this is kind of creeping over a little bit into goofiness. Not that there's, and it's another kind of goofiness I like Skeletons on Motorcycle. It's a goofiness that feels out of sync with the aesthetic of the rest of the game. And one of the consequences of the fact that Cornell mode does not have a penalty for the time limit, as I mentioned before, is that you can use sun cards with impunity. There's basically no reason not to use the sun card if you have it, and if you're going into a significant combat situation. So this is the boss, so to speak. The Tower of Science. Really not the boss fight that I would have expected or recommended. I remember saying in Castlevania 64 that I expected, this is another break? I think this was another nose running related pause. I think that's what that was. Because I remember saying in Castlevania 64, like, the Tower of Science is full of these, experiments, but it would be kind of cool, and it would be kind of in, like, the tanks, but it would be cool to actually fight one as, like, a boss of the level, but that's not what they did. I guess maybe they figured that would be too similar to, like, the Duel Tower, like fighting a big monster. That's kind of what you have to do in the Duel Tower in a lot of areas. So the Duel Tower was my favorite, one of my favorite levels in Castlevania 64. I really don't like this version of it as much. This first part's okay. It's a part later on that really kind of annoys me. I also want to point out that these guys, that the werewolf seems to take variable damage. I think it might be a thing where you do more damage to it if it's attacking, but I can't really tell. Ironically, well, I actually, no, I guess it makes sense. So here I'm letting wolf form run out intentionally, so that way I can pick up those gems and actually start hoarding them up. Because there are 3 fights in the Duel Tower. You fight a cat, you fight a dog, you fight a minotaur, and then you fight a big dog at the end. That's the boss. And I was able to keep wolf form for the first 2, but I'm not going to be able to keep it for the minotaur because we have this big platforming section in between the wolf fight and the minotaur fight. There's a couple different ways to do this. You can do a thing where you slide under it or where you jump over it. I usually prefer jumping because it just feels like a little bit more under your control. But this part, it's not... this part's a little bit tricky. This is a part where I sometimes would try to slide under it and sometimes would try to just go for it. I think I'm not going to slide here. Because I think there were a couple times when I was practicing this level where sliding here got me killed, and I got kind of skeevy about it. But I think that was pretty close. Yeah, this part, I really don't like this at all. You're supposed to just wait for a gap in the rotation, but the tricky part for me is, like, I can't really tell how far away the blades are from the ledge or how much, like, wiggle room I have in like, when I can jump off the ledge to get through that gap. So that part has fucked me up before. There's a trick to fix that, which I'll demonstrate in my hard mode video, but which I didn't figure out at the time, and which would have been very nice to have. So the Minotaur fight was a fight that I actually skipped in Castlevania 64, because in the Dual Tower in Castlevania 64 had two different routes. There was one route with the Minotaur fight and then like trickier platforming, and then another route with easier platforming and no Minotaur fight, which begs the question of why the harder platforming route even exists. Here, you have to fight the Minotaur. And the thing that I do there is that when he revs up his charge, he'll like jerk his fists back 3 times. On the second like fist movement, that's when I run and I jump, because if you wait any longer than that, then he'll move too fast and hit you. This part is really frustrating because it's the same problem I was encountering before with basically like depth perception. And my depth perception, I don't know, I just seem to have trouble with it, with like judging where something is. Like when, like, because what you're supposed to do here is wait until the blades go past, run past them, and then jump and grab on the ledge. And I think that there should be, yeah, there's a generous enough gap there to make that work. But this part here is tricky. Or at least was tricky for me initially, because it was the same issue of like, when can I actually run forward past them and then jump, and then jump and get on the ledge. And so that just took some getting used to. And again, I found a different way to do that in hard mode, which you'll see. What the devil? Oh, I think I know which one is his jerk-off arm. Werewolf with an A. I want to say I used to know what the etymology of werewolf was, but I think I've forgotten it. So this boss is honestly pretty frustrating, because I just kind of have a hard time telling what he's gonna do when he does it. So basically, what you want to do is not let him get that close to you. That was very risky. There seems to be a similar thing going on with him as with the small dog fight, which is that he seems to take more damage when he's attacking. And basically what you want to do is you want to just get close to him to bait him into revving up some kind of attack, but then immediately gain distance and just wail on him so he takes a bunch of damage. So here's the Tower of Execution. I guess I would say this is better than the C64 Tower of Execution. The C64 Tower of Execution had a few parts, that were pretty awkward, and it mostly seemed to resolve around like one central tower, and was fairly short. This one's much more involved and has much more like variety with what's going on, and feels more like a level. I don't particularly like it, but I didn't really like the Tower of Execution in Castlevania 64 either. So that's not different. I actually could have gone there. What I like to do with this part is wait until the spikes, right there, until the spikes come out right at the point when the blade is in the middle, because that means that I know that the spikes are going to go down as the blade swings away. This room took me a lot of time to get used to, and it has to do with the weird angle that the swing blades are at, where they're not like directly between two platforms. They're kind of at this like weird angle where it can be easy to lose sight of them, and think you're safe, or think that when you jump you'll be at a certain distance in front of them that they won't hit you, but they really are. And the trick is just to basically not get fucked up by the weird angle. Pretend they're right in front of you, and just like wait until they swing away from you. Just treat it like you would any other swinging blade section. Wait until they swing away from you, then jump. And that does mean waiting and like sinking a little bit towards the lava, but you have time. If you get to one of those floating platforms, you have time to just wait for a perfectly safe moment to jump. And that was what was tricky for me to figure out. Yeah, I like how This Tower of Execution is more, more varied. I feel like I'm in Bowser's Castle. That's always how this part felt to me. The way that the Tower of Execution plays out is kind of uninteresting in Legacy of Darkness, but it's not any less interesting than it was in C64. And there was one very particular obnoxious moment in the Tower of Execution in C64, which is thankfully completely gone here. Basically, you had to like try to climb up on a ledge while an infinitely respawning skeleton was throwing bones at you, and that's been removed, so he fell off. I wasn't expecting that. So the fact that that has been excised from the Legacy of Darkness iteration of it kind of makes it better by itself. There are moments when these guys are vulnerable and moments when they're guarding, and it's very hard to tell what the difference is when they're invisible. Yeah, I don't know what exactly... I think Cornell was supposed to be a martial arts character, which is why he's like punching and kicking things in the little flashy action intro. But then when it came time for them to actually design the game, I think they must have realized that having to close a bunch of distance to fight every enemy you encounter was not conducive to entertaining gameplay. And there's a motorcycle. And off it goes. No, where's he going? Is this dude just idling outside? Where is this guy? Okay. Anyway, so this part with the boulders falling down into the lava, this is like... This reminds me of like Mario. I never quite thought I'd have like Mario flashbacks in a Castlevania game. Where is this guy? Okay, I guess he was stopped at an intersection or something. Fucking hell. See, this is why I should do these commentaries earlier in the day or later during the night. Because right now it's like, what time is it? It's like 7:30, so everybody's out doing stuff. But I like to get these commentaries done. I don't like to wait until it's super late at night. I like to get them done while I'm still like kind of refreshed and while I still have some caffeine in my system. Because I tend to sleep in pretty late. Anyway, this isn't about me, this is about Legacy of Darkness. Yeah, the parts of the boulders falling into the lava, it's visually interesting, but the way it plays out gameplay-wise is pretty basic. And I'm always kind of two minds whenever I talk shit about the gameplay in Legacy of Darkness or Castlevania 64. Because on the one hand, yes, it's very basic. On the other hand, if it was any more complicated, it would probably be frustrating. And that's the dilemma you're faced with when the game that you make is only barely functional on like a fundamental level. That's hyperbole. That's unfair. But when the controls are awkward, it just inherently limits what you're willing to do. So there's the Tower of Execution. Not bad overall. On normal mode, there's not really anything in there that's going to trip you up. Tower of Sorcery. So the Tower of Sorcery, that fucking hits me? God damn. I'm actually shocked by that. This is why I was killing these guys with the cross earlier, because their range is insane. And you can't really like even see what they're doing. There's just like a little like clear spray that just kind of travels some direction. Like, why am I not using the cross? I should really be using the cross here. Oh no, I know why. It's because there's a boss fight at the end of the Tower of Sorcery that I want to save up hearts for. Yeah, there we go. That's how you would fight them without just outranging them. You wait until they attack, then you dip in, swing, and then dip in and swing. So the Tower of Sorcery, I would say, is probably one of the biggest downgrade. It's probably the biggest downgrade between like redesigned levels in Legacy of Darkness. My complaints are very simple. I have one very specific complaint about a particular platforming challenge late in the tower, but my bigger complaint is just the fact that the colors are so much less vibrant. The biggest thing the Tower of Sorcery had going for it in Castlevania 64 was, well, there were two things. One was that it was just a very memorable, very challenging level, with a really great atmosphere, and then the other thing was the visuals of it. The colors, the stained glass windows, the bright crystals everywhere. Like, the Tower of Sorcery in Castlevania 64 is fucking gorgeous. And then in this game, with this version of it, for some reason, they muted all the colors. Like, these cone platforms here that appear and disappear, in Castlevania 64, these things were, like, bright pink. And, like, the platform that I'm standing on now would probably be, like, really vibrantly green. So I don't quite know why they decided to make them look more like textured when they really didn't need to be. I don't know. And I also don't like the way that the platforming challenges play out in Tower of Sorcery as much. There's a lot of very, like, well, I guess the original Tower of Sorcery. What I was gonna say is that there's tricky things involving ledge grabbing, and like when to pull yourself up from a ledge. Yeah, that was pretty fucking risky. Normally, what's safe to do there is to hang off the ledge and then wait, and then see if. Oh my god! I can't believe I did that. That was fucking scary. Usually what I do when I like make jumps like that where I'm trying to ledge grab is I'll like hold down the A button the whole time. So there I must have let go of A and then hit B and then held down A again, like right before I got to the ledge. That was really unnecessary. And this right here is my least favorite part of the whole level and probably of the whole game. So at first it seems like the challenge is jump on the first cone when the lightning thing isn't blocking you, and then jump on the second cone to then jump on these, and like the central problem is the lightning barrier, and then the I can't believe I did that. I must have just been pissed and want to just like get past this shit. There's no reason. That's the only reason I can think of why I wouldn't wait for another angle to come at that jump from a more conventional for another pass to come at that jump from a more conventional angle. But the problem back there with the two disappearing cone platforms and the lightning barrier is that you can jump. You'll like jump on the first one, and then you'll jump on the second one. And then the smaller yellow platforms that orbit in circles around the pillar will be at this point in their pattern where like you can't reach them. And so you stand there and you're like waiting for them to like change their pattern to the point where they can be reachable. And then they just aren't, and then the platform you're on disappears and then you just die. So it's like you have to keep track of how fresh both of the platforms are, and also the lightning barrier to make sure is dictating when you can start getting on the platforms. And also you have to somehow pay attention to the pattern that the smaller golden platforms are on to try to sync all four of those things up, and it's just impossible. Like, you just have to get onto the second platform when it's as fresh as possible and just hope to God that you can stay on the platform long enough for the little gold platforms to come at you at a to be at a distance that you can reach, and it's very, very frustrating. I like this teleports right in over his shoulder. I think his fists got bigger. Maybe they turn into paws. Maybe that's what it's supposed to be. Wait a minute, but the opening text crawl said they were blood relatives. What's going on here? When this boss fight first started, when I first got to this part of the game, I was really worried because I wasn't sure how Legacy of Darkness would handle a doppelganger fight, or where you're fighting somebody who's roughly the same size as you, because Castlevania 64 had a few boss fights like that, and they were pretty tricky, but fortunately he turns into a giant monster, which makes things much easier. Although this fight is actually, as you can see, pretty tricky and very punishing. You really only have a brief window to attack him, and if you get too cocky and don't really respect his attacks, then he'll just jump on you. This worked because he had a delay, but usually if he glows blue like that, and you're not already in the process of moving away from him, you're probably gonna get hit. Yeah, and the reason that I was surprised there is because if you're close enough to him, he'll glow blue and do the paw swipe thing that you saw there, which you can just dodge. But if you're too far away from him and he glows blue, then he'll leap at you, and you can't really dodge that unless you dodge it preemptively. And again, what I mean by preemptively dodging is if you're not in motion when he's glowing blue, you're probably going to get right there. It's exactly what I'm talking about. Or if you're in the process of attacking, rather, and he glows blue, you're not going to be done attacking in time to get out of the way. So this is disappointing, because I was really hoping to be done with this fight by the time I was finished with wolf form. This is why I was holding on to my gems, because I wasn't really sure how long this fight would take. And again, he's not taking that much damage. I'm really having to wail on this guy to bring him down for this last phase. So that boss fight's actually pretty cool. It's exactly what I was talking about before, where it's a boss fight that's demanding, and that demands that you actually learn him and actually respect his patterns. And it's the only boss fight, or the first boss fight in the game, that Cornell can't just four-shot with the dog form. Excuse me. This is pretty cool. The cutscenes in Legacy of Darkness and in Castlevania 64 hit a good... They hit a nice tonal sweet spot for me. Where they're taken seriously, but they're not too dour, and they don't go on for too long. Shit. Oh, I think I went. I think I got up. I think went to AFK to go fucking blow my nose again. So now we go into the clock tower, and the clock tower in Castlevania 64 was 3 rooms, and in fairness to Castlevania 64, they were pretty. Some of those rooms were pretty scary, and you could definitely die in them, but it was not a big deal. The clock tower in Legacy of Darkness is more like an actual finished level. There are definitely more than 3 rooms. However, I think it kind of goes on for too long. You you basically end up doing the same thing over and over too many times. And I'll point it out when we get to it. I think it's tough to say, because what I'm trying to figure out in my head right now is, do I prefer the Castlevania 64 clock tower, or do I prefer this one? And logically, I should prefer this one, because one of the most striking things about the Castlevania 64 clock tower is that the camera just like stops working. Your ability to control the camera in Castlevania 64 is questionable throughout most of the game, but when you get to the clock tower in C64, it literally just stops working, and it just picks whatever angle it picks, and that's just the angle you're doing the level in. This level has the same camera functionality as all the other levels, which is an improvement, kind of objectively speaking. It's not very often that you can describe like a video game comparison or criticism as an objective criticism or like an objective improvement, because so much of because games are art and art is subjective, but posing the question of, does this baseline feature of the game even function in the level? Yes or no? Yes seems like it's objectively better than no. So I guess I do have to give it that, but the C64 clock tower is much better about not overstaying its welcome, and I would describe the Legacy of Darkness clock tower as definitely overstaying its welcome. I also think that even though the items that Renan sells are more expensive on hard mode, I was still basically never happy to see money come out of a torch. I always wanted jewels. I always wanted hearts, and I never really wanted money. If I ever say hearts when I talk about these games that have jewels instead of hearts, just trust that I'm talking about the jewels. Jewels, gems, diamonds, hedrons, whatever the fuck you want to call them. Hearts. I should also mention something about Renan, that I believe functions the same in Cornell mode as it does in Carrie and Reinhardt mode for C64, which is that if you spend $30,000, 30,000 gold at Renan's shop, he becomes a boss fight in the late game. I never did that because naturally progressing through the game, I would usually come out with like 24,000 or 25,000 gold, and I would have to, the only way I could see to make up the remaining 5,000 would be like farming enemies for gold, which I really did not want to do. So, and I explained this in my previous video, so sorry if you've heard that before, but I just wanted to make sure. I have a feeling there will be people who watch this video who do not watch the Castlevania 64 videos, because Legacy of Darkness is often touted as like a straight upgrade, and because who doesn't want to see a dog man? Who doesn't want to see a wolf man fighting people, right? I do kind of wish I was a wolf man more often. I can't think of any reason why you would rather play as a white-haired anime dude than as a dog at any point in the game, but the wolf mode does create an interesting gameplay mechanic for Cornell that's unique to him, so I can't complain too much. Yeah, this is the part that I'm talking about. These parts of the clock tower where you have to wait for platforms to rotate around to bring you to the right angle to do more platforming, I'm really not a fan. I don't like it when games make you go too fast, and I don't like it when games make you go slow. I prefer to be able to take platforming at my own pace. That's even if that's not an option, like, I guess I would rather have to go slow than have to go fast, because going fast would be harder, but it would also be more fun probably to actually do, and definitely more visually entertaining to pull off, as opposed to this like very, very slow process of climbing up these platforms. And so I think this is a big part of the reason why this clock tower level feels so much longer than the Castlevania 64 clock tower. Number one, because it literally is. There's like twice as many rooms, and number two, because the things that you do in the rooms are dare I say, tedious. I like the music, though. I think the music's okay. I was trying so hard to get myself centered on this platform. I should be careful here. Yeah, the fire is going to come out. I think I'm right over the pit at the center of the room right now. So I think if I did get hit while I was trying to do that crossing, I would die. And also, if you land or are dragged in between two gears, you get crushed and you die. So that's also a thing you have to worry about. Oh, look at that. It's a lady on the ground. Oh no. Ada. That's pronounced Ada. I only know that because he says it at the start. Imagine all the people. Oh shit, look out. That was a remarkable little maneuver he pulled off there. Oh, okay. I was always confused by this. It's only now that I'm watching the footage. I guess Ortega put her there. Because I never really got what she was doing there. Because it's like she escapes and then she gets immediately recaptured again. And I was like, what's... But, okay, I guess Ortega put her in the clock tower. Okay, okay. Now I get it. Sorry, these games are just too complicated for me. The plot is just too like intricate. I can't handle anything more complicated than a Belmont has to fight Dracula. If there's any more moving parts than that, my brain starts to hurt. This part's pretty cool. Again, like I wish I could go through the clock tower level in Legacy of Darkness with like a scalpel and just like cut out the parts that are like repetitive or boring and just leave like the cool or the exciting parts. Like I'd probably cut out half of the last big room we were in, and then I'd probably cut out half of this next room too. Yeah. Excuse me. I mean, maybe they figured... Excuse me. There was so much that they wanted that they had to cut from C64. Maybe the idea was, well, now's our chance to do everything we wanted. We're going to have every clock tower level concept in there. We're going to have all 4 of the redesigned levels. We're going to have, like... And that's what I mean when I say that the second half of the Cornell story in Legacy of Darkness is a gauntlet. Because it's like, it just goes on and on and on for so long. I guess I would probably also cut out parts of the Tower of Execution. I feel like the Tower of Execution does the same thing over and over again a lot. The Tower of Sorcery, as much as the Legacy of Darkness Tower of Sorcery, as much as I shit-talked it, it doesn't ever exactly do the same thing twice. Well, I guess it does. There's a couple different moments where you have to navigate the disappearing platforms, but that's pretty minor. I don't know. I'm wondering now if part of the reason why my reaction to Castlevania 64 was so positive was because it was kind of like a classic Castlevania game where the game lasts a long time because it's tricky or because it's difficult, but then once you learn it, you can go through it pretty fast. Obviously, Castlevania 64 still took a much longer time to do than any classic Castlevania that I've played, or any classic Castlevania period, but even so, I guess what I'm saying is like a frustrating part is like this right here. By the way, what's happening? I would cut this whole part completely. There's nothing fun about having to move really slowly, ever. Zero times in video games is it fun to not move, I would say. But what's remarkable about the clock tower is that as long as it is, it's almost never dangerous. The only part of it that I'd say that's really scary is this part with the spiky thing flying around. This part's actually pretty harrowing because you have to wait until this like brief window where the fire thing is still on cooldown, but the spike thing is not directly in front of you. And if you don't take that fast enough, the spike thing will whirl around and hit you. So originally I was jumping there just in anticipation of the spike thing coming around, but actually jumping is smarter because jumping forward in Castlevania 64 takes you forward faster than just running does. So jumping there is not actually done for the vertical component, it's just done for the speed component. And this next part's actually also pretty fucking weird. Although I did figure it out eventually. I don't think I had a great system for it at the time of this footage. No, it wasn't until I did the Carrie and Reinhardt levels that I got better at this. So my plan with this, what you want to do is you want to get onto that little wooden outcropping. And my plan at this point was to fall down at a specific point that I could grab the ledge if I'm close enough, pull myself up onto it, and then, why am I pulling myself up onto it? See, I should have just stayed on the ledge, actually. And just, oh, that was dumb. Yeah, that's not the best way to do it. What I should have done there, and what I do in the future, is I'll just stay hanging on the ledge there, and then just shimmy along to the edge, the edge of it, and then just drop off. And if you drop straight down off the edge of that thing, while you're on the left side of it, you'll just slide right down into the last part of the level. And I don't quite know what I was going for there. I feel like I should have known at this point that just trying to walk straight off of that plank wouldn't work. Yeah, this is not smart. I guess if I'm yeah, this is really hard to watch. This is so bad. I guess this is another way that the clock tower can take a long time is if you're fucking bad at it, like I am. Or was bad at it, at least. I got better. I found a better system. It's a good thing there's not a time limit, or else I'd be fucking myself here. I seem befuddled. I guess I didn't really understand it at the time what the good angles were. This whole part is kind of obnoxious anyway. Like, yes, I'm fucking it up, but it's also very frustrating how specific it is. This is so bad. This is a real shit show. Thank God I have all these healing items to keep on making up for all my fuck-ups. I don't know, there's probably a million different ways to do this, but I had my heart set on this one thing that had worked a couple times while I was practicing it, but okay, now I'm doing it right. What I'm wondering now is I wonder if I actually had settled on, yeah, that method that I did at the end there was exactly what I was talking about, and I'm now wondering if that was what I had settled on, but I just forgot that when I got there. Like, I wonder if I forgot what I did to make it work. I like how the music stops when the clock does. It's a nice little touch. Listen to that silence. That's how you fucking build tension. So, the last big difference between Cornell mode and I'll just say Castlevania 64 is that the Dracula fight is different. So Dracula in Castlevania 64 has 3 phases, is how I think of it. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but he basically has 3 phases. Um, Legacy of Darkness, Dracula has 2 phases. The first phase, the phase 1 in Legacy of Darkness is the same as phase 1 in Castlevania 64. Phase 2 is totally different. And I'll talk about it. I'll wait a little bit to talk about it, because I want to mention, it bothers me a little bit that the dialogue Renan has here is exactly the same as it was in Castlevania 64, because Castlevania 64 is supposed to take place 8 years in the future. So he talks about an impending civil war that he has to now disappear to prepare himself for. But then 8 years later, he's back in Dracula's castle, and then at the end of the game, he says, there's another impending global war that I have to go. I mean, I don't know how hard it would have been for them to write new dialogue for this bit. He could have come up with a different excuse to leave. I don't know. Or you could just skip this. Like, there's no contracts available after this point, so, like... Well, I guess they needed to include that for the boss fight. Maybe that complicates things. But what... I mean, you could just... I don't know how hard it would be to have him say something different. I don't know. I guess they were already kind of, like... getting a lot done in a relatively short period of time between the release of C64 and Legacy of Darkness. But again, I think a lot of their efforts were not necessarily worth it, because I think a lot of the levels they redesigned were not redesigned very well. But I think maybe they had to for like the Tower of Science and Tower of Sorcery, because those levels are very clearly designed around Carrie's jump distance and movement speed, and I don't quite know if Cornell's, like I don't know if there are ledges that Carrie can reach that Cornell can't or not. If so, then that would necessitate redesigning the levels. And I guess they figured as long as they were tweaking them, they might as well just change the layouts entirely. At the very least, to justify the purchase of a new game. So it's like making changes kind of for the sake of making changes, which can be a bad thing. There's this consistent crystal element to magic as it's portrayed in Castlevania 64 and Legacy of Darkness. That's like Actrice's big thing. That's all over the Tower of Sorcery. That's, of course, the currency for sub-weapon usages is jewels instead of hearts. I'm not ascribing any particular significance to that, it's just something I noticed. Oh shit. Of course that's Count Dracula. So I think I'm just going to absolutely shit on Dracula here. The first phase is going to be over very fast. The second phase is a different story, and the second phase of the Dracula emphasizes a problem with the combat that doesn't really become apparent until you get to that point. Yeah, I think I'm going to 3-shot him here. And, okay, good. And it's really important that I do that fast, that I don't, like, protract that phase any further, because every second that phase goes on, I'm losing gems, and I want to have enough gems to also, finish him off during phase 2. Correct, I'm not trying. Oh my god. This is a little bit confusing to me. But I guess... So I guess there was a village of people, and a long time ago, the werewolves destroyed the village and saved her, and then brought her back to the werewolf village, and then raised her to be Cornell's sister. But then the werewolf village got attacked and burned down by Ortega, and the skeletons. So there's two different village destruction, village burnings going on in the backstory, which is a little bit confusing. I guess it's supposed to be a story about redemption at the end. So I get that, but I also don't quite get what's going on here. But I'll talk more about that at the end of the boss fight. So when Cornell attacks, if you hit the B button, he'll do his air blade thing. The laser blade, he swings his sword, shoots the projectile blade. But if you hit B again, too quickly after you shoot an air blade, Cornell will slash the air with his claws in like a close-range melee attack. That's a problem because it now means there's a timing component to your attacks where you can't just like hit the B button over and over again to spam it to get the second attack as soon as the first attack finishes. You now have to like attack, then wait, then attack. And that's really important here because Dracula's going to do a fireball spell, which can only be blocked. And first is this lightning thing, and I don't get this shit at all. I guess I dodged it. I don't really even fucking know how I did that. I tried very hard to figure that part out, but I never could. But the fireball attack, it's this one right here. So this one is only clearable by doing that, by doing two like laser air blades. But if you don't get that timing exactly right, if you hit B and then you don't hit B, I also turned into a dog too early here. I should not turn into a dog until he's ready to be attacked again. And there, I usually don't get hit by that, but there I did. I have no idea how I dodged that last ice attack with the icicles on the floor. And also dodging these guys is like, sometimes they just like swarm into you and hit you, and then sometimes they like forget how to attack you and they do nothing. And then this last part, there's a very tight window. Right. So when he opens his stomach mouth like that at the very end and it glows gold, he's charging up like a super attack that does a bunch of damage, but there's a brief window where you can hit him. And if you kill him in that last vulnerability window, then he doesn't finish the attack, obviously, because he's dead. So the way that the Phase 2 of Dracula is structured is that he has these very brief windows of vulnerability which are open as he's doing some of his most dangerous attacks, which is interesting, but the way that the attacks are, I really don't understand the way that they work. Like his third fire, like when he does the volley of 3 fireballs, you have to very specifically do like air blade, then air blade, on a really particular timing. Then with the ice attack, I understand the ice attacks, but then when he does his super ice attack where he like slams his fist down and like brings icicles up from the floor, I really have no idea how to dodge that. I guess it involves jumping, but if you jump right before he hits the ground and summons the icicles, he'll just hit you with his fist as he's finishing the attack. Like, it's a really specific thing. And then when he summons the skull worms, it's like sometimes they just wander off and don't hit you, and sometimes they all swarm you way too fast for you to ever do anything about it. So I really don't understand it at all. And that makes the fight very frustrating. And it's worse on hard mode, because on hard mode, he'll like, if you fuck up one of his fireball attacks, it'll literally kill you. Or if you fuck up his third fireball attack, it will literally kill you, because you'll get hit once, and it'll knock off half your health, and then you'll be stunned, and you won't be able to, like, use any healing items or anything, and then you get hit by a second fireball, and you die, so... If you're wondering what the fuck is going on here, I guess this was all part of his plan. Cornell, I guess, gave up his ability to turn into a dog to save Ada. Somehow he was able to replace her in the crystal with his dog soul, which gave Dracula the strength he needed to revive, which now means Cornell can't be a dog anymore. But I guess it turned out okay. This is so funny. It's not Shadow, it's the little kid from before. So I guess there are wolf spirits that are separate from the werewolf people, who the pendant and the pendant, whatever. Whatever, it doesn't matter. That's what's funny. Legacy of Darkness is a prequel to Castlevania 64, and the story of Castlevania 64 had some vague, like, elements of the backstory that I thought would be elaborated on more in Legacy of Darkness, but Legacy of Darkness just ended up kind of adding on more vague backstory, which, you know, doesn't really matter, but it's not what I was expecting, and it's a little strange. I don't know which villagers he's talking about. If he's talking about the werewolf village that was burning at the start of the game, or if he's talking about this other village raid that happened at some point in the past. I guess that is supposed to look more convincing than it does. Oh well, I don't want to be an asshole. This is so funny. This is such like a Japanese thing. He's trying to tell her some like awkward truth, and she's like, just don't worry about it, everything's gonna be okay. Remarkably chipper attitude for a chick who was like kidnapped. I don't know why their eyes are cut off here, by the way. I thought that was a problem with how I was displaying the game for a while, but like there's way too much being cut off for it to be the result of like, this is also weird, the triple zoom. I think it's supposed to emphasize the emotion of the moment, but like usually if there's like a drastic zoom like that on something, it's a bad thing. And he stops right as he gets to the fake wall, or the wall that's supposed to indicate part of the forest. One of the consequences of playing these games in the higher resolution than they were ever intended to be viewed is that sometimes things that are supposed to look a certain way don't look as convincing. It's an unfortunate compromise that has to be made. It doesn't have to be made, that I chose to make. So that's Legacy of Darkness. Like I said previously, my expectations for Legacy of Darkness were high, because my expectations for Castlevania 64 had been low, and they were exceeded. So this is not like the big improvement over Castlevania 64 that I had hoped it would be. Yes, some of the baseline systems function better, the camera functions better, the combat is better. Some of the level redesigns are good. The Forest of Silence is pretty much an objective improvement. I was kind of waffling about that when we were actually in the Forest of Silence, but looking back on it, I'll say safely that that's a better version of that level. Better version of the villa also in Cornell's story. So, but then you get to the second half, and it's like Art Tower, Ruins Tower, Science Tower, Duel Tower, Execution Tower, Sorcery Tower, Clock Tower. It's just too much. It's just too much all in a row. And I really disagree with a lot of the decisions they made in the redesigns of the late game levels. So I would concede that Legacy of Darkness is better than Castlevania 64, but it's not really better by that much. And it's frustrating to me that that's the case. Cornell's story is kind of like Cornell's story has some pretty major roadblocks, or some pretty major speed bumps rather. But it is mostly just kind of more Castlevania 64. A little bit lacking in some of the atmospheric elements, I think. I think it's the fact that you're going through all those tower levels all in a row makes it trickier to feel like you're in. There's just some kind of environmental dissonance. It's hard to put into words. But for some reason, the Tower of Science and the Tower of Sorcery just kind of make sense that they go together. And the Dual Tower and Tower of Execution also just kind of make sense that they go together. So when you're like jumping back and forth between them, it feels a little bit weird. It feels like there's some kind of tonal consistency that's lost. Um, so those are my complaints. Most of my complaints are about the late game, and I think that the Dracula Phase 2 fight, on the one hand, it's good that it's really scary, but it's very, very frustrating to actually try to play, especially on hard mode. And I am going to upload hard mode footage, which you guys are going to see at some point in the future, probably pretty soon. Oh, my AFK. I think I went AFK while the credits were rolling because I forgot that the music keeps going. Or no, I probably may have like my headphones on and I was alt tabbed or something. All right, here's the intro again. I feel like there's a whole like werewolf lore backstory that I maybe it mentions it more in the instruction booklet. But I like that it's establishing how powerful Cornell is, because if you think about it, Cornell like shits all over Dracula, and his combat is really jittering. That is kind of disturbing. I wish I knew what was causing that. I guess if anybody knows anything about like N64 emulation, let me know. So if I ever record any more N64 gameplay for any other games, then I know how to fix that. It's nice that they're acknowledging how powerful Cornell is, because Cornell does seem like he's pretty OP. And like the dog, you don't really appreciate how much damage the werewolf does until you do the same sections on Carrie or Reinhardt. Then it's like, okay, the dog form is like insane. Again, be shrouded in darkness. Tasteful Greek mural. Or mural of the Greek gods, I'm guessing. I'm glad that they remembered that it's the Eastern Orthodox Church, because this is supposed to take place in Eastern Europe. Wait. No, that doesn't make sense. I just had a really weird thought. But I thought maybe it's the implication that Malice is supposed to be the son of Cornell and Ada somehow, but they'd have to have the kid immediately because he's eight years in the future. Whatever, it doesn't matter. That's Legacy of Darkness. Hope you guys all enjoyed. More footage coming soon. More to talk about in the future. Keep on Earth rocking.